In the fading golden light of a remote African village, the dust of the day's end settled on the quiet road. A man named Kofi was carrying a bucket of water back to his family's hut when a movement in the distance caught his eye. From the tall, dry grass, a massive shape emerged, stumbling, staggering, its powerful legs buckling beneath an impossible weight. It was a lion, a king of the savannah, reduced to a trembling shadow. His magnificent mane was matted with mud and thorns, and his eyes were glazed with a deep, profound exhaustion. He took one last, faltering step onto the village path, his gaze locking with Kofi's for a heart-stopping second, and then he collapsed. His great body hit the earth with a soft, final thud, just feet from where the man stood frozen. The bucket slipped from Kofi's hands, water spilling into the thirsty red soil as a chorus of screams erupted from the village. People scrambled for safety, believing the worst, expecting an attack. But the lion did not move. He simply lay there, a fallen monarch breathing his last on a dusty human road. This was Simba, a name given by the elders who remembered his reign. He had been the undisputed king of a territory that brushed against their lands, his roars a nightly reminder of the wild's enduring power. But the wilderness shows no mercy to its rulers. A brutal fight with younger, ambitious males had left him scarred, defeated, and exiled from his own pride. A deep gash on his flank, now infected and pulsing with disease, had rendered him too weak to hunt the swift antelope. Days turned into weeks without food or water, a slow and agonizing sentence of starvation under the relentless African sun. Driven by a primal thirst he could no longer ignore, he had stumbled toward the only source of water he knew, the village well. It was a desperate, suicidal gamble. In his weakened state, he posed little real threat, but the villagers, armed with spears and fear, could have easily ended his life then and there. He had chosen a path of certain death, hoping only for a reprieve from his thirst. As the initial panic subsided, Kofi stood his ground, his heart pounding not with fear, but with a surge of unexpected pity. He looked at the mighty beast, seeing not a monster, but a creature in profound suffering. "We cannot let him die here," Kofi said, his voice firm amidst the whispers of the crowd. "This is not how a king should fall." But the danger was palpable. If they approached incorrectly, if Simba mustered a final burst of defensive energy, someone could be killed. A plan was hastily formed. They would not threaten him. They would offer him life. They brought bowls of water and chunks of meat, approaching with a reverence usually reserved for sacred things. A call was made to a wildlife rescue organization hours away. They would keep him alive, stable, until professionals could arrive to safely. Fascination on their faces. Some elders warned of the folly. "You are feeding a demon that will remember your kindness as weakness," one muttered. But Kofi and a few others were resolved. They were staring into the eyes of a dying king, and they chose compassion. The first attempts to offer water were acts of breathtaking courage. A young woman named Amina, her hands steady despite the tremor in her soul, crept forward with a calabash bowl. She poured the clean, cool water onto the ground near his mouth. The lion's head lifted slightly, a weak, rumbling growl echoing in his chest, a final warning from a fading power. But the scent of water overrode his fear. He began to lap at the mud, his tongue slow and parched. Every movement he made was watched with bated breath. As dusk descended, a new threat emerged. The whooping calls of hyenas echoed from the darkness, drawn by the scent of blood and weakness. The men of the village built a large ring of fires, standing guard with sticks and drums throughout the long, tense night, protecting the lion from the true scavengers. It was a surreal vigil, humans defending a predator from other predators. The next morning, a change was in the air. Simba was still desperately weak, but the water and food had ignited a tiny spark of life. Kofi, feeling a connection that defied all logic, knelt down in the dust, closer than anyone had dared. He placed a piece of meat directly before him, his own hand just inches from those lethal jaws. The lion watched him, his intense eyes studying the man. There was no growl this time. Instead, he slowly stretched his neck forward and began to eat. When he finished, he didn't retreat or posturing. He simply rested his massive head on his paws, his eyes blinking slowly at Kofi. It was a moment of silent communication, a truce forged not in words, but in mutual respect. The villagers watching from a distance felt the shift. This was not a standoff. It was a communion. Just as hope began to solidify, it was nearly shattered. The rescue vet arrived, and the team prepared the tranquilizer dart. But the sound of a child dropping a metal pot sent a shockwave of panic through the lion. With a surge of adrenaline, he stumbled to his feet and lurched back toward the tall grass, disappearing from view. Despair gripped the rescuers. If he ran now, the stress and exertion would certainly kill him. For 2 agonizing hours they tracked him, finally finding him collapsed under the scant shade of an acacia tree, his breathing shallower than ever. The light was fading fast. They had one chance, one shot, before darkness would give the hyenas the upper hand and make a safe recovery impossible. The vet took aim, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. The dart flew through the air and found its mark. Simba's reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. He roared, a deep, resonant, and heartbreaking sound that was less a threat and more a final lament. The roar of a king betrayed, echoing across the plains and silencing the entire village. Then, the sedative took hold, and he slumped into unconsciousness. There was no time to lose. The team swarmed in, working with frantic yet precise efficiency under the gathering twilight. They cleaned his festering wounds, administered life-saving IV fluids, and treated him for dehydration and infection right there on the ground. The villagers gathered in a silent, wide-eyed circle, their fear replaced by a shared, hopeful anxiety. Would he wake up? Or had their intervention come too late? As the first rays of the sun painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, Simba stirred. His ear twitched. Then, slowly, with a grace that belied his ordeal, he lifted his head. His eyes, now clear and focused, scanned the faces of the people who had saved him. A collective gasp, followed by tears of joy, swept through the village. He was alive. In the days that followed, he was transported to a nearby sanctuary to finish his healing. Weeks later, when he was strong enough, Kofi visited the release site. The lion stood tall, his mane beginning to regrow, his body once again a powerful testament to nature's resilience. He turned to look at Kofi one last time, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked away, melting into the tall grass of the reserve, a king returning to his domain. This lion's collapse on a village road could have ended in a tragedy of fear. It could have been a story of a threat eliminated, but instead, it became a lesson etched into the heart of every villager. It taught them that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that compassion is more important. Simba's survival became a powerful symbol of coexistence, a reminder that we share this world with magnificent creatures who deserve our respect, not just our fear. His story is a testament to the fact that every life has value, and that sometimes the wildest heart can be saved by the simplest act of kindness. It leaves us with a challenge. The next time we are faced with fear, will we choose to build a wall, or will we, like Kofi, choose to extend a hand? The days that followed were a delicate ballet of hope and anxiety. Simba was moved to a temporary recovery enclosure, a safe space where the deep gashes on his flank and the lesser wounds could be properly treated, away from the threats of the wild and the curiosity of the village. The initial fear of confinement was palpable. The first time he awoke within the sturdy wooden boma, he roared, a sound that was less of threat and more of confused betrayal, echoing across the compound. Kofi visited every day, sitting quietly outside the enclosure, speaking in low, soothing tones. "This is not your prison, brother," he would say. "This is your fortress. Here, you heal. Here, you become strong again. The veterinary team worked miracles and administering a steady regimen of antibiotics and nutrients through his IV. Slowly, the haunted look in his eyes began to fade, replaced by a growing awareness and a flicker of his old, regal spirit. The lion who had collapsed in the dust was gradually disappearing, and a new animal was emerging in his place. With his physical health improving, a new challenge presented itself: the preservation of his wildness. A lion cannot be turned into a pet. His spirit was meant for the open savanna, not the confines of even the most comfortable enclosure. The rescue team began the critical process of soft release. They stopped hand-feeding him, instead introducing live prey into his large enclosure. First, small, easy-to-catch animals. The first time a guinea fowl fluttered in, Simba merely watched it with bored confusion. The instinct to hunt, dulled by weeks of being provided for, seemed to have vanished. It was a terrifying setback. Could a king forget how to be a king? But nature's programming runs deep. Days later, driven by an ancient impulse he couldn't name, he finally stalked and pounced. The move was clumsy, inefficient, but it was his. That successful kill, the taste of his own earned meal, was the final key to his rehabilitation. He was no longer a patient. He was a predator again, proud and self-sufficient. News of the village lion spread like wildfire across the region, but not as a cautionary tale, as a story of hope. The video of his collapse and the villagers' brave response was shared on a local news station, and then it caught fire online. Donations, small and large, began to trickle, then flood into the small rescue organization that had aided him. The funds provided new veterinary equipment, a better vehicle for emergency responses, and the means to build a larger pre-release facility for other animals in need. Schoolchildren from the village and beyond drew pictures of Simba and Kofi, and the story was told and retold, becoming a local legend. Most importantly, it changed perceptions. The farmers who had once seen every lion as a threat to their livestock now saw an individual, a creature capable of suffering and worthy of compassion. Some even joined new community watch programs designed to protect wildlife and prevent human-animal conflict. The fear that once governed their relationship with the wild was being slowly replaced by a sense of shared stewardship. The morning of his release arrived, charged with a potent mix of excitement and sorrow. The gate to his enclosure was opened, leading into a vast, protected reserve. For a long moment, Simba stood at the threshold, sniffing the air, carrying the sense of his future. He looked back once, not at the people, but at the enclosure that had been his sanctuary. Then, with a powerful, graceful stride that seemed to dismiss the memory of his weakness, he walked out. He didn't run. He simply vanished into the landscape. The villagers and rescuers who had gathered to watch let out a collective, held breath. There were tears, but they were tears of joy. They had not tamed him. They had returned him. He was home. Months later, a research team conducting a wildlife survey in the reserve captured something extraordinary on their trail camera. The footage showed a magnificent, fully maned lion, healthy and powerful, standing atop a rocky outcrop, surveying his kingdom. As the camera zoomed in, there was no mistaking the distinctive pattern of old scars on his flank. It was Simba, and lying nearby, resting peacefully in the shade, were two lionesses of his new pride. He had not just survived, he had thrived. He had reclaimed his birthright. This final image, the fallen king restored, is the ultimate reward for the courage of a village. It proves that every life is worth fighting for, and that compassion is the most powerful force we possess to change the story for the creatures we share this planet with. His legacy is not just his survival, but the hope he ignited. A hope that continues to grow long after he disappeared into the grass. Of course, here are two more sections to complete the narrative. But the story of the village and the lion did not end at the reserve's boundary. A new, delicate balance had to be found. The very proximity that had nearly killed Simba now required thoughtful management. The rescue organization, empowered by the global attention, worked with the villagers to establish simple but effective measures. They helped reinforce livestock enclosures with stronger, predator-proof fencing, eliminating the reason for most conflicts. They installed a new solar-powered water pump a mile from the village, creating a reliable water source for wildlife that would keep them from desperately seeking out the village well. Kofi became an unofficial ambassador, teaching the children to respect the wild animals from a distance, to understand their ways without fear. The village's act of compassion had forged a new identity for them, not as victims of the wild, but as its guardians. They learned the signs of a struggling animal and who to call. They had transformed their fear into a vigilant, proud watchfulness, ensuring that no other creature would have to suffer as Simba had. Years later, the legend is still told, but now it is woven into the very fabric of the community. For Kofi, the memory is not of a terrifying predator, but of a pair of exhausted, intelligent eyes that met his own and spoke a universal language of suffering. He often looks toward the horizon, not with apprehension, but with a quiet sense of connection. Somewhere out there, the descendant of that once dying lion rules his territory, his roar a deep, resonant thread in the tapestry of the night. That roar is no longer a sound of fear for the villagers. It is a reminder of the day they chose empathy over panic, life over death. It is a testament to the incredible truth that a single act of courage can ripple through time, protecting generations. The lion collapsed on the road, but in saving him, the entire village stood a little taller, forever changed by the king they helped return to his throne. Cumulative total character count for the entire script, original 9 sections plus all new sections, equals 45,454, without spaces. The true miracle was not just the healing of the lion's body, but the mending of a fractured relationship between man and beast. For generations, the story had been the same. The wild was a threat, and predators were to be driven away or destroyed. But Simba's journey rewrote that ancient narrative. He became a living lesson, a symbol that shifted the very perspective of an entire community. Parents who had once taught their children to fear the deep rumble of a lion's roar now spoke of it with a sense of reverence, a respect for a power that they had helped to restore. The village, once defined by its perimeter, now saw itself as part of a larger, breathing ecosystem. They had looked into the eyes of the wild and seen not a monster, but a soul. And in doing so, they found a piece of their own humanity reflected back at them.